right, this is lecture 6 from chapter 12, and we are picking up with polymers. So these are organic molecules that are made out of smaller pieces. So polymers just means many, poly for many. And so these are extremely long molecules that are made out of monomers. Mono for one. And so you can see up here at the top, we've got a polymer that is just made out of monomers. So the monomer can be, any sort of basically molecule. You can see monomers, they're just the individual units consisting of something that's either 4 atoms big up to 100 atoms big. So these monomers can range in size. And polymers can either be natural or synthetic. So we're going to look at both natural polymers and then synthetic polymers. So let's take a look first at our natural polymers. So our natural polymers are what we call the macromolecules. These are just very large organic molecules that are going to be combined together as a combination of smaller molecules, monomers to polymer, and they're usually joined together in a chain-like structure to make these macromolecules. They are going to be made by plants and animals for a variety of functions, as we'll see, some of them for energy, some of them for structure. It just depends on what they need them for. And there are 4 main types that we're going to look at. So you may have seen some of these if you've taken a biology class, because these are the 4 biological molecules. So we're going to look first at proteins. So we ended our last lecture talking about the amine functional group. And this is where the amine functional group comes in. So you can actually see the amine groups here. Here are the nitrogens. With the hydrogen, you won't see the other hydrogen because it's actually been used, there it is, in a peptide bond to the next, what we call amino acid. So these proteins are formed from monomers called amino acids. So the monomer is an amino acid. And the amino acids vary. As you can see, they come in different shapes, but they all have the same basic central shape here. So what are proteins used for? This polymer, these have lots of functions. So they're used to do things like build muscle, hair, skin. So they are a structural polymer. But they're also used to catalyze reactions, meaning that they actually help reactions go. Like they help speed them up so that the reactions can happen faster than they normally would. And then the one that you see down here in this corner, this is a protein that has been folded into a molecule called hemoglobin. You may have heard of this one before. This is the protein that your red blood cells are full of that we use to carry oxygen to our cells and then carbon dioxide away from our cells. So lots of functions for the polymer of proteins. In fact, they can be made into hundreds and thousands of different polymers with those different amino acids. Now the next group are the carbohydrates. These are our next polymer that is a natural polymer. These are important for plants and animals as a food source. In fact, most of us, this is our favorite natural polymer because we really like carbohydrates. But carbohydrates are also used for protection and structure for some plants and animals. So what 3 elements are in every molecule or monomer of a carbohydrate? Well, if you take a look at the name, you might get a hint. So carbo, we know that it's an organic molecule, so it has carbon in it. And then hydrate actually gives you the other 2 elements. Because if you're hydrating, what are you drinking? You're generally going to be drinking water. So hydrogen and oxygen. For carbohydrates, there are three forms for carbohydrates. Monosaccharides, these are the monomers that we are going to use to build the polymers. There are disaccharides, di for two. So these are just built out of two of the monosaccharides, so just two monomers. And then the true polymers, the polysaccharides. So we're just going to take a quick look at some of these. So monosaccharides, the most abundant one is one you I'm sure have heard of, which is glucose. So this is what you call blood sugar. This is what we find in plant sap and the human bloodstream. So if you've ever had maple syrup, you are actually drinking glucose. That's what maple syrup is, if it's not made out of corn syrup. True maple syrup is actually plant sap that has been drawn out of the plant and then boiled down to make that syrup. So as I said, it's commonly called our blood sugar in humans. Fructose is another monosaccharide. This one actually has the same molecular formula. It's also C6H12O6, but it has a different taste. It has a sweeter taste. Fructose for fruit. This is the monosaccharide that is found in fruits like apples and oranges. This is what gives them their sweet taste. And the reason why it has the same molecular formula but a different taste is because it has a different shape. So it fits in different receptors in our taste receptors. So that's why. So if we take a look here, here is the two molecules. This is glucose right here. Here's fructose. And you can see same molecular formula. So there are the 6 carbons. If you count them up, you'll find that there's the same number of oxygens and hydrogens. But you can see down here on the end, the structure is different, and so these guys are going to fit different. And so that difference in structure causes fructose to be twice the sweetness of glucose. And so, like I said, fructose is going to be commonly found in fruits. So the disaccharides, like I said, di for two. So these are going to be combinations of monosaccharides. The most common of the disaccharides that you're going to be familiar with is table sugar. So this is actually called sucrose. So if you ever see sucrose on a label for anything, that's what we're talking about. It's the white stuff. It also can be the brown sugar. Brown sugar is also sucrose. It's just not been processed to remove some of the impurities. So sucrose is actually extracted mainly from these two crops, from sugarcane and sugar beets. If the package doesn't say that it's from cane, from sugar cane, or that it's cane sugar, then it's actually been extracted from sugar beets because it's actually cheaper to grow and extract sugar from sugar beets. The other two main disaccharides that you run into are maltose. That's this one in the center. This is malt sugar. If you've had malted milk balls or a malted milkshake, this is that malt. It's not very sweet, but it still has a little bit of sweetness to it. And then lactose, the milk sugar. Again, doesn't make it very sweet. These aren't as sweet because they aren't going to contain fructose. Sucrose does contain fructose. These two over here contain glucose and other sugars. Another one's called galactose, that are not as sweet as that fructose. And then our last group for the carbohydrates are the polysaccharides, the true polymers. So these are made of monosaccharides and long chains. Now here in the picture you see that there's only two, but these are going to be hundreds or thousands of monosaccharides long, and they can either be in straight chains or they can be in branched chains depending on which molecule it is. The best known out of this group that you would be familiar with are starches. So plants make starches to store food, and then we take advantage of that in things like rice and potatoes. and wheat. Those are actually storage, basically facilities for plants, for their food source. We use that as a food source for ourselves. And then cellulose is also made by plants. This is what makes things like celery and other vegetables crunchy, because that cellulose is actually made for structure. Now, cellulose is not digestible by humans and not digestible by most animals because there's actually a difference in the bond arrangement. So if you look here, this is a starch, and you can see that the bond goes in this direction. Cellulose, the bond goes in a different direction. And because of this one difference, the enzymes, the proteins that would catalyze, break those guys apart, we don't have those, and neither do the bacteria that live in our gut. And so we aren't allowed, or we aren't able to process cellulose. And so this is why fiber, which is the common name for cellulose, doesn't break down in our gut and passes through our system. The next polysaccharide isn't a big polysaccharide, or I'm sorry, we finished with polysaccharides. The next polymer that is a natural polymer are the fats and oils. Most of these aren't very large as far as polymers go, but they are used for long-term energy storage. So this is one of the biggest ones. The biggest of the fats and oils is actually wax. Wax are really long as far as polymers go. So these are used for energy storage, fats in animals and oils in plants. And they all pretty much look the same except for those waxes with a longer tail on the waxes. And then the last of the natural polymers are the nucleic acids. The nucleic acids are built out of these little units right here. You may have heard of these guys: adenine attached to its full nucleotide, thymine, cytosine, guanine. So it's built out of the little nucleotide units, and these are going to be used for information storage in living organisms. So this is our last of the natural polymers. In our next lecture, we're going to pick up and talk about our synthetic polymers, our man-made polymers, and what they look like and what we use them for.